Hello, thank you for joining me in my study. I hope you've enjoyed our reflections on the doctrine of the atonement over the past several weeks. It's a subject of endless fascination, isn't it? Let's take a step back at this point and reconnoiter to determine exactly where we are. We saw that in discussing the doctrine of the atonement, we need to look carefully at one's theory of punishment. And that the theory of punishment involves two aspects. On the one hand, the definition of punishment, what it is to count as punishment, and on the other hand, a justification of punishment. We've now devoted several weeks to a discussion of the definition of punishment. And we saw that challenges to the coherence of penal substitution, of God's punishing Christ, can be successfully met. We saw that it's open to the penal substitution theorist to deny that God punished Christ. Rather, he could say that God inflicted Christ with the suffering which would have been punishment had it been inflicted on us instead. Or alternatively, the penal substitution theorist can simply reject an expressivist theory of punishment for which there are no good knockdown arguments. Even more fundamentally, however, we saw that the objectors to the coherence of penal substitution have fundamentally misunderstood the expressivist theory of punishment. That theory of punishment only requires that an attitude of condemnation be exhibited toward the wrong which has been done, and doesn't preclude that a substitute might be punished in the place of the wrongdoer. And finally, we saw that given the classic Reformation doctrine of the imputation of sins, that there is no problem with punishing Christ for our sins because Christ would be justly condemned by God for the sins imputed to him. And we saw in our last two times together that there are in Anglo-American law exceedingly close analogies to the imputation of sins. So, let's now leave the definition of punishment and turn to a discussion of the justification of punishment. This is the area where the most significant objections to penal substitution lie. And so in our time together next week, we'll begin to look at the justification of punishment.